Welcome to the Bulletin Podcast.
Hello everyone and welcome back to the Brandt School Bulletin Podcast. I'm your host Evelyn Ha Nguyen. In today's episode, we will be discussing one of the most exciting and transformative developments happening right here on our campus, the intersection of artificial intelligence and public policy education. To help us dive into this topic, we are really honored to have a very special guest with us today, Dr. Hasnain Bokhari, the head of the Department of Digital Policy and Artificial Intelligence at the Willy Brandt School of Public Policy, University of Erfurt. Dr. Bokhari is currently leading a groundbreaking project to develop a specialized AI tutor for our students. Dr. Bokhari, thank you so much for joining us on the Bulletin Podcast today.
Well, thanks very much for inviting me, Evelyn. It's a pleasure.
To give our listeners some personal context, as someone who deeply studies digital policy, how did your interest in using AI in public policy teaching first start?
Well, of course, it didn't happen overnight. So you have to understand my own trajectory, disciplinary trajectory. So I come from an area of digitalization, and back then it was called as e-government. So my interest was mostly into looking at electronic public services. We call them G2C services or G2B services or G2G services. So I come from that particular area. And you see the different public services in use. And of course, my interest was also intersected with concepts such as digital inclusion or digital divide. So AI was a natural progression of all things digital that I was doing. Because now when you look at new public services, public administrations, they are all looking towards embedding AI-based solutions. And our job sort of here is at the School of Public Policy to understand the governance side of the story. So, like I said, it didn't really happen overnight. It was rather a general, incremental progression of things.
I think that it's a very incredible journey of you, that you developed your interest into a project that's very helpful for all the students. To make sure everyone is on the same page, in simple terms, how would you explain this new AI tutor project to a Brandt School student who has never heard of it before?
Well, you have to look at it this way. When you're working on a project or academic assignment, you sometimes wish you had somebody to talk to, or to discuss with, not to do your work, but rather, help you solve a specific puzzle. And perhaps to also give you an important feedback. And that is what we are essentially trying to build. It is an AI-based tutor that sits alongside your studies, which does not replace your lecturer, of course. I don't want to replace myself. But it does not work. It does not write the work for you, but to support your learning process. So a chatbot that asks you questions, a chatbot that could support you through your learning journey. So it's not a shortcut. What we are trying to build is a thinking partner.
I think it's a dream tool for all of us because there are a lot of chatbots available right now for students, but the one that is specialized for MPP student, for Master of Public Policy students, it's a very special tool. So let's get into the practical side of how it works in the classroom. What typical learning problems or sticking points in project-based public policy courses is the AI tutor meant to help with?
Well, you need to look at what kind of problems that public policy students deal with in their daily, day-to-day, graduate journey. They're working on real-world problems to begin with, and they analyze policies. They do comparative analysis. They write policy briefs. They research, above all. The challenge is that these tasks that we have, they require a sort of a very specific and structured line of thinking. And that takes time to develop, Students often struggle sometimes where to begin, and how to build a coherent argument and or how to connect theory to practice. they often get stuck and their lecturer is not always available, or their tutor is not always available. But this AI chatbot, we thought, could be designed to help specifically and precisely those particular moments, not by giving answers, of course, but guiding students through their own thinking process.
Thank you. I think that makes a lot of sense because when we look around, we see that students are using a lot of chatbots outside of the classroom, but it's not really specialized and also designed for the public policy that we are studying. It also leads to another question that I'm curious about. With all of the AI chatbots that are existing right now, what makes this AI tutor different from just asking any chatbot for help with assignments like we all do?
Great question, actually. But because that's the first thing every student would ask, why this chatbot, and why not this A, B, and C? And there are, of course, a bunch of very sophisticated chatbots out there. They're powerful, of course, and but the question is, do they know your specific course? Do they know your specific assignment or the brief that you're working on? Or are they aware of your learning objectives? Or perhaps also where you are in your own learning journey. They can give you answer, of course, and sometimes these answers are pretty sophisticated, I must say. But the question really is that are they really helping you to become a better thinker or a writer? So what we want perhaps from our chatbot is that we want it to be course aware, your particular course aware. We want this to be learning aware. We want this to be designed with a specific pedagogical purpose. And that's what is important to us. And mind you, the goal is not to produce outputs for the students, but to develop this capability, that is there for them to think. And I think that's the fundamentally different thing. And it's a fundamentally different design philosophy, I would say.
So you said that this AI tutor is more objective and more public policy focused than any other chatbots. The chatbots can also be trained, and it can also learn anything that we are taught at school and then design its answer to adapt and then develop the responses in the future.
Right.
So do you think this one, the new AI tutor that you are working on, would be significantly better than the existing AI chatbots?
Right. That's a very good question. So I would have to put it this way. We are not building a chat model, right? That's very important to know. We are trying to take a chatbot. We are trying to take a AI model, generative AI model that is out there and it's open source. That's important for us, and which is GDPR compliant, right? That's also very important for us. And we are trying to train it based on the needs of our courses. And we have taken one specific course here and see how would it work and how would it help. Normally, when you deal with the chatbots, they mostly give you answers. Sometimes there are also techniques such as prompt engineering, and you contextualize your chat, and then you train it. But then that stays there and only for that specific task. This chatbot is not a competitive chatbot, just to clarify. This chatbot is not a public policy chatbot. What this chatbot, I think, is trained on the kind of curriculum that we teach here at the School of Public Policy. It adheres and it tries to answer those specific queries and questions that we deal with on daily basis while we teach here at the school. So what's important here is to understand what kind of teaching do we have. It's problem-based, it's project-based, it's thinking-based, it's conceptual, there are a number of it. So we are trying to pilot a chatbot which deals with that specific kind of curriculum, And mind you that we are not doing it alone. We are doing it with a with our partner from University of Applied Sciences in Erfurt. So this is a joint project of two universities. So it's not just us who is doing it alone. So I hope this answers your question.
Thank you so much. I think it's so much clearer now. And of course, it's a built chatbot designed for the student, and it's also still in the pilot phase. So I think that there would be a lot of data that you also need to collect and learn from it and then improve when you actually implement the project in a broader scale. But whenever we bring AI into education, the conversation naturally shifts into responsibility. What are your main ethical concerns when bringing AI into the classroom, and how are you dealing with these concerns in the AI Tutor project?
I think our main concern, and honestly the biggest concern, would be dependency. That's something we don't want our AI chatbot to do, or to make our students dependent, because we don't want our students to outsource their thinking, do we? So the tutor would be deliberately designed to not answer you questions, but rather ask you questions. It's a bit more Socratic approach that we are trying to follow, Tutor would deliberately ask you questions, and the privacy, of course, is of utmost concern for us, and it's non-negotiable. We are fully GDPR compliant, and that's one of our major priorities for this particular chatbot. And students will always know that they are talking to an AI chatbot. So basically, transparency from day one.
Thank you for mentioning GDPR. Could you explain it in simple terms so that the students can understand it better, so they can know that the AI tutor is different from the other chatbots? And I also think that it's significantly better when you have an AI tutor that can challenge you back, not the one that agrees with everything that you say and supports everything you say, because you also know that there are a lot of problems with AI agreeing to the people's opinions, and it leads to a lot of consequences that are out of control.
I think these are two different particular tangents here. One is gratification, that there is an aspect of gratification in all these chatbots. The moment you ask something, it tells you that, oh my God, this is one of the greatest questions that was ever asked. Not that you won't ask a great question, but what I mean is that there's this sense of gratification that these chatbots are built with. That's number one. That's something that you touched upon. The second aspect of the story is the GDPR, which is more important. And this has to be seen from the regulation perspective. GDPR is a directive, is a regulation that is there in European Union and is applicable to all EU 27 states. And GDPR says that it has a list of items, and basically it's about the data protection and data integrity, that how your data is being stored and forwarded and used for further purposes. That's what GDPR makes people comply with, or make companies comply with. Earlier in 90s, we had a different kind of a regulation here in Europe, which was called as Data Protection Act. Over the years, perhaps over the years when the dot-com bubble came, the e-commerce websites came, the social networks came, and different kinds of platform came, they all started recording people's data, And one of the common example is when you are on social networking websites, you often receive targeted advertisements, And the question is, how did they know? How did they know that you might have liked this news, or you might have liked that particular product? That's where GDPR comes into the picture, that any company which operates within European jurisdiction has to comply to General Data Protection Act regulation, the GDPR, which means the companies have to explain how your data is, stored with them, and if this data would be reused or used for any processing of any other knowledge or information. That's what GDPR does. And in fact, if companies are found not doing it, these companies can be fined, and there have been examples in European Union where companies were found not to comply with the GDPR and they had to pay heavy fines. Now the same story goes for the chatbots as well. Chatbots are recording loads of information which is about you. Some people anonymize it, some people don't. But the question is, when all this data is stored in these chatbots, A, how will it be used, reused, or will it be forwarded to someone? So if you notice at the bottom of every chatbot, number one, it says that the answers may be unreliable, and number two, it says this data will be reused to help train the model better, or to better train this model, So when I say that this chatbot would be a GDPR compliant, we're very serious about what happens to this data. Where is it stored? How will it be handled? So everything is actually based within the European jurisdiction. Even the model that we are going to use will be an open source model and a GDPR compliant model. The data that will belong to students will be GDPR compliant based, storing of the information, which will be based here in Germany. So our server where the data will be hosted will be within Germany, and where we are following the GDPR regulations. Just to explain how, when I say what it means to be GDPR compliant.
Thank you for letting us know that it's a very safe place to start, because we are right now the students in Germany, and the regulation from the EU would be very helpful and supportive for us, and we can rely on it to help in our daily tasks and assignments. So now looking at this from a faculty perspective, if the AI tutor takes over some routine guidance, how do you think the role of lecturers and teaching assistants will change in your courses?
Well, as I said earlier, I'm not going to replace myself, am I? You see, this you have to see this as an expansion of the lecturer's outreach. It's not a replacement to begin with of their role. The AI tutor would handle the routine tasks, the repetitive guidance that is needed, answering the same structural questions that students may have, even for the 15th time at 11:30 p.m., when your lecturer or tutor might not be available, So this kind of frees up the lecturer's time to focus on what a human can actually do, and that is challenging students intellectually, providing nuanced feedback, facilitating critical discussion. If anything, we expect from lecturers to become is to be more impactful and not less relevant. So that would be rather axing your own feet if you say that we are going to replace the lectures. No. And I think every technology that comes, every ed tech, the educational technology that comes, is supposed to be a supporting and a facilitating tool, and not to replace, but to help you with your learning journey.
So it sounds like it could actually humanize the classroom even more by freeing up time. Since this is a developing project, what will you look at to decide whether the AI tutor really improves students' learning and engagement? What are the metrics for success?
Good question. I think you have to look at it in two different ways. Or in fact, we are looking at things in two different ways. One would be the numbers, what is the engagement number here in the chatbot? Because this chatbot would be absolutely voluntary. We are not going to make this chatbot as mandatory. It is just there for students to help them support in their learning journey. So the numbers would be important. The engagement numbers would help us tell that in how far students are using this chatbot. The assignment quality, I think that would be quite important to see that how far their assignment quality has improved. And of course, also the course outcomes, the overall course outcomes. So that's the more rather, if I may say, a quantitative aspect of the story. But then there's also a human side of the story, which is more qualitative, that do students actually feel more confident? I think that is a difficult task to do, and also to ask if the students feel that they learned something rather than they just finished something. You have to distinguish between the two facts. And I think what I have noticed in my teaching over the last few years in our School of Public Policy, that students who come here, first of all, they are not fresh out of the undergraduate degree. They come after gaining a lot of experience, and they know exactly what they want from this degree. So I'm very confident that students who come here, they're really here to learn something and not just to finish their tasks. So I think that would be interesting aspect to measure as well. And like I said, I think the second question here, the qualitative aspect, would be harder to measure. But honestly, I think it's the most important one.
Yes, thank you. But if the data comes positive and the pilot is successful, how scalable do you think the model is within other universities?
I would rather help in saying that perhaps not the model, because I think you don't mean the AI model, or rather as a template, of this particular project. I think the underlying concept is pretty transferable, in my opinion. Of course, we are still in a prototyping phase. We are having a lot of meetings to decide what works, what doesn't, how should it work, how should it look like, Any course that would involve project-based learning or problem-based learning, which most of the courses actually in the universities are like, regardless of the discipline, I think every course faces similar challenges. And the content of the tutor, the AI chatbot, would need, of course, some adaptation, But I think the framework would travel. I think in terms of its quality, I think a lot of colleagues would like to try it. And I think once we have the prototype ready, we can also publish a practical guide that could specifically guide other colleagues in different faculties that how can they adopt this, and also perhaps apply that in their own contexts without having to reinvent the entire wheel. Because I think it would not make sense to me if we have just piloted this for one specific course, rather apply it on a broader scale. But I think we'll be more in a positive and more in a meaningful position by end of this next winter to see that how this pilot has run. And I think we will have more tangible results to talk about. But I'm pretty hopeful the way this chatbot is being designed at the moment, the way it is being considered, I think it has a lot of transferability and scalability aspect.
It's great that you already answered the one that I wanted to ask about the time that we can really see the AI tutor in place and helping the students. And it's also exciting to see that the Brandt School is setting a standard. That's very great news. So to wrap things up, let's look toward the future. Thinking about your students as future public leaders and policymakers, what skills do you most want them to gain from working with AI in general?
I think it has to be critical thinking, full stop. I think that's you see, AI will be there everywhere in the policy arena, in the policy field, which our students are entering very soon. We want them to question it. We want them to interrogate it. We want them to understand its limits. Not just use it blindly, but to learn that what capabilities there are and what drawbacks there is, And I think that's the real preparation for their careers. So I cannot emphasize the critical thinking part enough.
Yeah, I think absolutely that would be the most important skills that everyone needs to have in the era of AI. So one last question before we end our conversation today. Is there a common myth or misconception about AI in higher education that you would like to correct for our bulletin audience?
Just a one. I think there are many, but I think one that really is interesting is that AI in education is either going to save everything or destroy everything. I think that's the major misconception that I think people have. And I think neither is true, is it? Because AI is just a tool. It's a technology. Just like word processor is a technology. Just like web browser is a technology. It's a tool. And like any tool, its value depends entirely on how thoughtfully, A, it is designed, and B, it is used. So our project, our chatbot, is not about replacing human education and technology, It is about using technology to make human learning a better, richer experience, more accessible, and more effective, I would say. But this requires effective design, which is what we are trying to do at this moment. It requires honest evaluation, which we would do once with this piloting of this project starts. And then, of course, one of the most important things that is close to my heart is this ongoing dialogue with the students. I think that's the most important aspect that we must remember, because without this dialogue, I don't think we can reach what we want to do. And this is what is exactly we are committed to.
That is a wonderful perspective to leave us with. It also reminds me of the concept of human-in-the-loop governance that you also mentioned in one of the classes that you taught us in the last semester. Dr. Bokhari, thank you so much for taking the time to share your insights with the Bulletin community today. We are all incredibly eager to see how the AI Tutor reshapes our learning experience.
Well, thanks very much, Evelyn, for inviting me. And I'm also very curious and excited to know the outcomes of our own AI chatbot project.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning into the episode of the Brandt School Bulletin Podcast. Stay curious, keep exploring, and we'll catch you in the next episode. Goodbye for now.